was to kill the bloodlines, the very bloodlines of Jesus Christ, the Druze. 6 years later, they merged with Skull and Bones, the Rothschilds, the Schiffs, the Rockefellers, the Serfs, aka Bushes, Kissingers, etc. And the UK royals were artificially inseminated by the Rothschilds and had taken control of the satanic Sanusi Hassan family of Libya. So we know that these 4 boys were then in jeopardy. They were in jeopardy because they belonged to the Druze family, the Jesus strand. Now, let me set a little bit of framework, a little bit more of what was going on as well. The real Holocaust of the descendants of the Druze, or the Christ descendants, happened between 1911 to 1943 in Libya, where hundreds of thousands of Libyans were murdered in camps in both Libya and in military prisons in Italy. And by 1912, thousands of Libyans were shipped and murdered in Gaeta military prison. So that's a little bit of history as what was going on. So because of this, Ibrahim Lincoln, or Ibrahim Kaluni, Abraham Lincoln, sent 3 of his boys to Benghazi. We're going to talk about William Wallace Lincoln, who was sent to Benghazi in 1863.
As they say, Benghazi ain't going away.
That's right. So in 1863, when William Wallace, who we thought had died, history tells us these 3 boys had died, William Wallace was sent to Benghazi, Libya, and they changed his identity. His identity became Omar Mukhtar. Now, Omar Mukhtar is 131. John F. Kennedy is 131. The Chosen One equals 131. God is Christ equals 131. Make America Great, 131. The Alpha and the Omega, 131. And Mary and Jesus, 131. Omar Mukhtar, we may know him, many of you may know him as the Lion of the Desert in the film with Anthony Quinn and Oliver Reed. And he was another freedom fighter, just like his namesake, William Wallace of Scotland. Now, Omar Mukhtar was fighting for the independence of Libya. He was fighting for the independence of Libya against Mussolini and the Italian troops, somewhat like the Roman Empire, who had taken control of Libya and colonized it. And were also looking for the descendants of the Jesus strand. Unfortunately, Omar, well, before I get into that, let me say that Omar, or William Wallace Lincoln, married an Armenian woman. They had 4 children. They had 3 girls, Saida, Galim, Mary, and they had a son. Now, Mary married a prince. She married Prince Said Isa Kaluni. Isa in Arabic means Jesus. In Egyptian, it means God saves. And Islamic faith, it means a prophet's name. So Mary married Prince Said Isa Kaluni, and he was also a freedom fighter. They had 2 children. Now I want you to listen to the names of the children. They had 2 sons, Joseph, who was born July 20th, 1915, and John, born May 29th, 1917. Now, like Omar, he was a freedom fighter, and Omar was executed, unfortunately, in 1931 for his efforts to free Libya from Mussolini's grasp. The prince was also executed, and in an effort to protect their sons, they were sent to the United States, Joseph and John. They were sent to live with a very famous family, and the patriarch and matriarch of that family was Rose and Joseph Kennedy. Rose and Joseph Kennedy adopted Joseph and John, and they became Joseph and John Kennedy. As we know, John married Jacqueline Bouvier. It was an arranged marriage, and they had 4 children. They had Arabella, Caroline, John Jr., and Patrick. These descendants are the descendants of the Jesus strand of the union between Mary Magdalene and the union of Jesus Christ. And that is why their lives have been in jeopardy, because the cabal is trying to eradicate anyone, any descendant of the Druze. So now I'm hoping Toronto is still on. I know you're over in Toronto. Are you still there, Toronto?
I'm still here.
Oh, you're such a trooper.
Listening
Thank
like
you.
it's my first time. I love it.
I know, sweetie. So Toronto is going to talk about the connection between what I've said and Armenia, because Armenia plays a very strong role in this whole story. So take it away, Toronto.
Thank you, Sabrina. Okay, so I came to this channel a couple of months ago, and listening to Sabrina and Negative, there's been so much dots connected, and how Armenia, who is a small land in the Middle East, a family of my ancestors, and it's showing me the connections to Noah, to Jesus, Christianity, the Khazarian mafia, and as Sabrina just mentioned, the Kennedy family. So a little bit of history on Armenia. Very similar to what we're experiencing here as patriots, fighting for God, country, and freedom. Having been born in Toronto to two Armenian parents, that's all I've kind of been, that's all I've heard since kindergarten. It's God, country, freedom, and wars and battles ever since. So a little bit of, let's go back to Noah. So I'm not sure if you all know, if you've been on this call before, the biblical flood that happened, and with Noah's Ark, it landed on the mountains of Ararat in Armenia. Some historians say that this makes Armenia the cradle of all civilization. And to this day, it's known as the land of Noah. I did a little bit of gematria on that. Armenian land of Noah comes to 165, which is also heritage of Abraham, Fresno, California. I looked into that, and apparently since the genocide, which I'll get into, a majority of Armenians ended up in Fresno, California. So that was one of the names that came up in the gematria. Also, second coming of Christ, holy bloodline of Christ, the bloodline of Christ, Donald Trump's nuclear war, which I thought was kind of, not technical, but what he's done for us. And Donald Trump is the beast. So giving you a little bit of
Resurrection 165, Politician Trap 165. Thought that would be fun. Just made that one on the fly. And Tower 1, if you use the number, and Tower 2, if you use the number, is 165. And Tower 1's 110 stories. Tower 2's 110 stories. President 110, American Badass 110. Operation Warp Speed 220. Military Operation 220. American Badass President 220. Hit it.
Thank you. So Armenia is in the Middle East, situated between Turkey, Iran, and Azerbaijan. Native to their land since the dawn of history, Armenia traces back to 4th century, and it became the first country in the world to officially embrace Christianity. I was reading how nuns in groups from Rome would escape the emperor there at the time and come to Armenia because they were free to be Christians and to not be, killed because they would not accept it in Rome at that time. So that happened in 301 AD. Saint Gregory convinced the king of Armenia to make Christianity a state religion. And to this day, 97% and more are of Christian faith. So this Christian nation, devoted to God, ended up bordering eventually all Muslim countries that over time converted to Islam. Fast forward to 15th century, Armenia was absorbed into the Ottoman Empire. The rulers were Muslim, and this is when history ties us to who we've come to learn, the Khazars, the Rothschilds, the Khazarian mafia. One of the countries that the Khazarian mafia Satanists, took power and control of was Turkey. In the late 1800s, the systematic and premeditated killing and deportation of Armenians started, and by the end of World War I in 1917, over 2 million Armenians were slaughtered and killed, children and elders, men and women, all for religious persecution. They refused to convert to Islam and denounce Jesus Christ. The plan has been and still is to Turkify sea to sea that part of the world. There are French and German reporters that have quotes from the Ottoman Empire. They're called like pashas, like kings at the time, saying that they're going to wipe the Armenians off the face of the planet and leave one as a historical fact that they were here and they are no longer. I'll actually drop a map of Armenia of the size that it was before the genocide and what little is left now. Just give me 2 seconds. There we go. Okay. So that was before and after the genocide. Many fled, marched through the deserts in horrific conditions, starving, being raped, robbed, and deprived of water, to the neighboring countries that Sabrina just mentioned, the Levant, mainly Syria and Lebanon. That's where my parents were born, in Lebanon. And there's a movie called The Promise, which is about the genocide, and then you can find that on Netflix and or Prime. So it didn't end there. That was in 1915 to 1917. To this day, many wars have been fought. Thousands of patriots and freedom fighters have died since. The army was controlled by the government, also cabal. And to this day, when there is war, there would be a call out to patriots from all over the world who would just drop everything, their families, and head to Armenia to battle, right up until the last few months of 2020. Amidst the pandemic, and all allied countries, all preoccupied with the coronavirus, Turkey and Israel, which is now where I learned through Sabrina and Michael, the Khazarian mafia, armed Azerbaijan to take over what's left of Armenia. I have some screenshots of Patrick Bouvier Kennedy, who was on Twitter, of just the most horrific things that these Azerbaijan current day youth were tweeting about, and it was just disgusting. And it was actually during this time that I met Patrick Bouvier Kennedy on Twitter, and he'd share with me why they are after the bloodline of Armenians. And he said something very interesting, and I quote, "If they declassed the JFK files, this current genocide would never have happened." So this got me on a journey of researching what he meant by that. The ties to JFK, whose grandmother was Armenian. And in my research, I found documents that Lady Diana was also part Armenian. Patrick would say, and I quote, "Religion is a big fat lie. It is the bloodline they're after. They, the Rothschilds, are Antichrist, and they hate Jews and Armenians, the Druze, the descendants of Christ." So you could just imagine, I'm 41 years old. All I've learned all my life is Turkey, Turkey, Turkey. They're after Armenians because we're Christian and they're not. And then to be exposed to all this and the real truth, learning about the Rothschilds, learning about the bloodline, and learning about the Druze. He then, I'm just going to give you a little bit of history about the Druze, because I asked my father, who was raised in Lebanon. He said that the most populated area of the Druze in Lebanon was at Golan Heights section of Syria, which was the most beautiful, he said. And eventually, he said it was sold to Israel. He's not as awake as us. So I would imagine if I dig there, there's a lot more than just Syria handing a beautiful section to Israel. He stressed that the Israeli army would specifically recruit the Druze, as they were the most trustworthy over any other cultures in the area. He also said nobody truly knew what or who the Druze worshipped. He said it was kept in secrecy and only the leaders knew. So I since researched what he said, and it's true. There was a lot of documents saying that the Druze are a secretive, surviving Gnostic community in the Middle East today who publicly claim homogeneity with Islam due to a historical fear of persecution. In truth, they have nothing in common with Islam and do not believe or practice any pillars of Islam or worship any of the Islamic figures revered by Islam. So going back quickly to the genocide, the Turkish government to this day denies that this genocide happened. And although many countries around the world have recognized it, the USA was not one of them until this year. On the anniversary of the genocide, April 24th, Joe Biden issued a statement saying, "The American people honor all those Armenians who perished in the genocide that began 106 years ago today." So we all know who truly made that official